If you trust a $20 waterproofing spray to keep your boots dry, the biggest weakness in your gear closet may be the can you think is protecting you. In the spring of 2025, California made certain waterproofing treatments illegal to sell. New York followed close behind. Not a warning on the label, not instructions to use less, a ban. The chemicals inside those cans were called PFAS, forever chemicals. They'd been found in drinking water and wildlife, and in the blood of nearly every person tested in this country. Once they got into the environment, they didn't readily break down. The lawmakers were right to take that seriously, but they accidentally exposed something the outdoor industry would rather you never stop to consider. Your great-grandfather kept leather boots dry through rain, creek crossings, snow melt, and 40 winters without buying a pressurized can of laboratory-made waterproofing. He used materials ordinary enough to sit beside the kitchen stove. Fat, wax, oil, heat. Nothing exotic, nothing disposable, nothing that required a warning label or a chemistry degree. And the old treatment did something most modern sprays don't. It stayed. A spray coating can begin fading after a few hard trips through mud, brush, and wet grass. Then the water starts darkening the leather again, and the can tells you what to do next. Buy another can. The older method could protect a properly treated pair of boots for an entire season. It fed the leather instead of laying a temporary film across the surface. When the treatment finally wore thin, you didn't throw anything away. You warmed the mixture and worked in another coat. So the question isn't whether the old method worked. It worked. The real question is why a skill that kept working boots alive for generations was replaced by a product that runs out, and why most people now feel reckless attempting something their grandparents considered routine maintenance. By the time we are finished, you will know how to make the treatment, how to apply it without ruining your leather, and how to tell whether your boots are actually protected before you step into bad weather. There are 6 pieces to doing it correctly. The first is the fat, the ingredient that softens dry leather and carries the treatment deep into the fibers. The second is the wax, the part that turns rain away instead of letting it soak through. The third is the oil, the piece that keeps the mixture workable when the temperature drops. The fourth is the warming, the difference between a treatment that penetrates and one that sits uselessly on top. The fifth is the reckoning, what one homemade batch costs, how long it lasts, and how it compares with the waterproofing can hanging in the outdoor aisle. Your grandmother could have shown you those 5 pieces at the kitchen stove, and those 5 alone are enough to make a serviceable boot treatment. But 5 is not 6. The 6th piece is the one most modern tutorials leave out. It isn't another ingredient. It is a pair of numbers. The first number tells you how warm the mixture must become before it can enter the leather instead of merely coating it. The second tells you how much heat the finished treatment can withstand before it softens, migrates, and begins sweating back out of the boot. Miss those numbers and the recipe can look perfect in the tin, spread beautifully across the leather, and still fail the first time the sun heats your boots on a long summer trail. Get them right, and the treatment settles into the leather, stays flexible in the cold, resists running in the heat, and keeps working long after a spray would have sent you back to the store. That is the buried heart of the method. Not nostalgia, not folklore. Temperature. Once you understand that, you can stop renting waterproof boots one aerosol can at a time and start maintaining them the way working people did when replacing a good pair wasn't an option. We will begin with the fat, but everything builds toward those 2 numbers. Stay with me. My name is Amos Walker. I'm the 6th of my name to live in Coldwater Hollow, up under Balsam Ridge. In the mountains of western North Carolina, same spring, same cabin my people raised 6 lives back. And I have my grandfather Ezra's journal. Oilcloth cover, cracked at the spine, and about 1/3 of it is boots. How he greased them when, and what happened to the men who didn't. There's a line from the winter of 1949. Wet feet is how the mountain kills a careless man slow. He underlined slow. So this isn't a lifestyle video, neighbor. This is me handing you something that was passed to me. Before I do, comment down below. Did your people grease their own boots? Did they have a name for the mix? I read every one of these, and it tells me who I'm actually talking to. 6 pieces, in order. Each one earns the next. Let's start with the oldest thing in the can, the fat. Picture a boy in Kentucky, breaking rails, mud to the ankle. At night, he works a lump of beef tallow into the seams of his boots by the fire till they go dark and soft. That boy was Abraham Lincoln, and that's how he kept his feet dry. Animal fat, beef tallow, mutton tallow, bear grease if you had a bear, is the base coat of the whole tradition. Up in the North Country, the trappers ran bear fat because it stayed soft and worked deep, and it kept the leather alive, not just dry. Leather is skin, friend, and it wants oil the way your hands want it in January. Here's what it does. Leather is a mat of fibers with air between them, and air lets water climb right in. Warm fat flows into that space and fills it, so the water has nowhere to go. Fat feeds the leather. Fat fills the pores. Fat is the base, every time. Now the fat alone has a weakness, and I won't hide it from you. Straight fat can go rancid. Over-soak a boot in raw tallow, and it turns soft and mushy. The stitching rots, and one wet spring the eyelets pull clean out when you lace up. The day Procter & Gamble put Crisco on the shelf in 1911, the whole country was taught that rendered animal fat was something backward, something you replaced with a product. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. They didn't outlaw the tallow. They just made you feel primitive for keeping a crock of it. Here's how you do it today. Go to any butcher counter and ask for a pound of beef sweet. Render it slow, and you've got waterproofing base for the price of a coffee. Under $3. But raw fat by itself will rot a boot by summer. What stops that rot is next. And if you skip it, everything you just did turns sour. The wax. Run your thumb across a honeycomb some evening. That slick, that seal, the thing that keeps honey in and water out through a whole wet season inside a hollow tree. That's beeswax, the single most important thing in the can after the fat. Here's why it works. Beeswax is built mostly of long, greasy chains that want nothing to do with water. The water-hating part overwhelms the rest, so the whole thing simply refuses to wet. Water lands on it, stands up in a bead, and rolls off. And beeswax does something fat can't. It's hard. It sets high and stays in the outer layer, instead of sinking through and turning everything to mush. The wax is what makes the fat behave. The old recipe is simple enough to memorize right now. Equal parts. Half rendered tallow, half beeswax, melted in a can standing in a pot of hot water. That's it. That recipe was written down in an outdoor book from the late 1800s, and it's the same one running the reproduction 1800s formula. Tins people pay good money for today: beeswax, tallow, a little fish oil, some pine resin. Fat feeds, wax seals, fat fills, wax holds, every time. Here's how you do it today. A 1-pound block of pure beeswax is under $15 and will outlast 3 pairs of boots. Melt it 50-50 with your rendered fat. But wax and fat set hard, and hard cracks in the cold. Bend a stiff boot, split the seal, and you've waterproofed nothing. What keeps it supple is next. Everything up to here your grandmother could have shown you before the biscuits came out of the oven. Fat and wax in a can. That part was never really lost. It was just shamed out of the kitchen. What comes next is where the old way pulls ahead of the $20 can, where it stops being a recipe and starts being a skill. Keep coming. The oil. I just told you wax and fat set hard, and the crack is where the water walks in. So the old-timers cut the mix with an oil to keep it supple, and the oil they trusted came from the shin bones of cattle. Neatsfoot oil. The balance is a light hand. 1 part beeswax to 5 parts neatsfoot oil for a soft leather balm. For a boot you want firmer. The old dubbin ran heavier. Half tallow, half neatsfoot, a little melted beeswax stirred in. You adjust it to the leather in your hands. Wax to seal, fat to feed. Oil to bend. 3 things. 1 can. Now hear me, because this is where people ruin good boots. There are 2 things sold under the name Neatsfoot. One is 100% pure Neatsfoot oil. The other is Neatsfoot oil compound. Petroleum distillates cutting cheap, and that stuff rots stitching just like rancid fat. The old makers, Phoebings and Bickmore, tell you plain, buy the pure, never the compound. The compound eats the very thread holding your boot together. Not a conspiracy, friend, just a cheaper barrel dressed up in the old name. Here's how you do it today. A bottle of 100% pure Neatsfoot oil is a few dollars and lasts years. Read the label. If it says compound, put it back. You now have the whole recipe. Fat, wax, oil in a warm can. And it'll still fail you, because putting it on is a technique, not a smear. Get the leather wrong, and the whole batch sits on the surface and does nothing. That's next. The warming. Cold morning, stiff dry boot, a can of set wax. And here's the most common mistake there is. You rub cold wax onto cold leather. It skins over the surface. It looks done. And the first creek you cross, the water goes in underneath it like the wax was never there. Here's what the spray never has to teach you, because the spray only ever sits on top. You warm the leather first. Clean, dry boot. Then heat it. A sunny windowsill, a heat lamp, a hairdryer held back, until the leather is warm to the hand, around 110 to 125 degrees. Not hot. Warm, the way a stone by the fire's warm. Warm leather opens its pores. And when you rub the warm mix into warm leather, it doesn't sit on the surface. It draws down deep into the fibers where the water wants to go. Warm the boot, then the wax. Never the wax cold. Never. Grandfather Ezra had one line for it, and it's the whole piece in a breath. Cold leather takes nothing. Warm leather takes it to the bone. That's the difference in your hand. The spray sits on the outside like paint. The warm worked wax is down in the grain. In the channels the water climbs. Here's how you do it today. Before you open the can, warm the boots by a lamp until they're too warm to rest your palm on. Then work the mix in. 10 minutes, no cost. If this is making sense so far, do me a favor and subscribe now, because the next 2 pieces are the ones nobody else puts in a video, and I'm not going to repeat them twice. Now, you'd think that was the whole trick. It isn't. Before I get to the number that makes it beat the can, I owe you an honest reckoning of what that $20 spray really gets you. The reckoning against the can. Let me be fair to the spray, because a man who won't grant his opponent's strongest point is a man you shouldn't trust. In a lab, on a single rainstorm, the modern spray beats the wax. True. A fluorochemical coating drops the surface of the fabric so low that water stands up at 130 to 150 degrees of angle and beads like mercury. The best wax gets you 110 to 130. On raw beating, in one test, one afternoon, the can wins. I won't lie and say it doesn't. But they tested the wrong thing. They tested the first hour. Nobody lives in the first hour. Here's the second hour. That $20 can, $18 for the big spray, $14 for the small one. Treats maybe 2 to 6 jackets, and then it's gone. And the coating gives out in about 10 to 12 days of hard use. So you buy it again and again, every few months forever. 2 jackets at a time. $2 of tallow and wax treats every boot, every canvas coat, every wool line thing you own, and holds a season on one warming, with a touch-up once a year. And then there's what's in the can. That beading chemical is a forever chemical. Invented in a DuPont lab in 1938, a family of some 15,000 compounds whose bonds simply don't break down. That's why they call them forever. 97 of every 100 Americans carry them in their blood. An old can of Scotchgard under your sink is likely full of them. In April of 2024, the government set a limit for 2 of them in drinking water at 4 parts per trillion. Parts per trillion, friend. California banned them from clothing in 2025, New York the same year, 11 states and counting, a full ban coming in 2028. Now, honest judo, because I promised you honesty. This isn't every spray is poison. Some newer sprays have gone clean. One outfit, Nikwax, has been free of the stuff since 1977. Good for them. The point is that the tallow and the wax never had the problem to begin with. You can eat what's in that can. Try that with the spray. And one more honest line, because here's where the loud claim would lie to you. This trick doesn't beat the spray in a Gore-Tex shell or a modern nylon rain jacket. On those, grease is the wrong tool. It clogs the breathing and ruins them. Overdo it on any leather, and you'll smother the boot's breathability too. So I'll scope the claim plain. On leather, on boots, on canvas, on wool, the real material's the mountain actually put on a man. It beats every $20 spray on the shelf. That's the honest fight, and the old way wins it. Those 5 pieces, most any old hand on any ridge from Georgia to Maine could have walked you through over coffee. Fat, wax, oil, warming, and the plain arithmetic of the can. What's left is different. This is the one nobody wrote down, because you don't write down a thing you know in your hands. This is the piece that turns a coating that sweats off your foot by noon into a coating that won't leave the leather on the hottest day of the year. The melt point. Here's the problem. Nobody tells you about wax, and it's why cheap dubbing fails. Wax melts. Beeswax on its own goes soft and runs at about 146 degrees. Your foot in a boot on a summer trail, the sun on a canvas coat. That's warm enough that a naive wax starts to soften, migrate, and sweat right back out of the leather it was supposed to protect. You greased the boot in March, and by July it's bare again, and you never saw it go. So here's the trick. The whole secret, in 2 numbers. You want the mix to go in cool and stay in hot. You want it to flow at a low temperature. The old timers warmed the boot to right around 105, 110 degrees, and the mix ran thin and drew deep into the pores. Low enough to soak in, and then you want it to set to a melt point higher than anything your body or the weather will ever throw at it. Done right, that set wax won't run again until about 155 degrees. So even on the hottest day, it doesn't migrate back through the leather. It flows in at a heat you can reach with a hairdryer. It won't flow out until a heat you'll never see inside a boot. In cool, stays in hot. That's the whole trick. Grandfather Ezra wrote it in one line, winter of 1949, and I've read it 1,000 times. Set it hotter than the foot will ever get, and the foot will never get it back out. That's why it beats the spray where it counts. The spray's beating gives out in 10 days, because it was only ever lying on the surface, waiting to rub off. The warm worked wax, set above your own heat, is locked in the grain. It can't rub off, can't sweat off, can't wash off in 1 hard hour, because to leave it would have to melt, and you're not hot enough to melt it. Now the one safety word, and this isn't optional. You're melting fat and wax over heat, and fat catches fire. Melt your mix in a can standing in a pot of water. A water bath. Never a burner straight under the can, and keep it off open flame. A grease fire will cost you the kitchen. Do it in water every time. Here's how you do it today. Warm your boot to where it's just too hot to hold. Work the 50-50 mix in until it stops drinking. Then let it set overnight, cold, and don't touch it till morning. When you lace up, that seal is set hotter than your foot will ever run. Now watch what happens when you run all 6 at once. You render the fat cheap from the butcher. You melt in the beeswax, half and half, in a water bath. You cut it with a little pure neatsfoot so it bends in the cold. You warm the boot till the pores open. You work the warm mix in till the leather takes it to the bone, and you set it to a melt point higher than your own heat so it never comes back out. Fat to feed, wax to seal, oil to bend, warmth to carry it in, melt point to lock it there. 6 pieces, 1 can, 1 skill, in 1 breath. Now stand it next to the $20 spray. The can beads higher for 1 hour in a lab, then dies in 10 days. The old way loses the first hour and wins every hour after. This was never really about a boot. It was about being a man whose feet don't get wet because he asked the store's permission. A man who can keep his family dry off a butcher's scrap and a block of wax and a thing his great-grandfather knew in his hands. Not needing a catalog, not needing a bottle, not needing a factory that puts something in your blood you can't get back out. That's what got taken from you. And that, a can of tallow and a warm boot and 2 numbers, is what you just took back. You don't have to render fat this week to own this, neighbor. Do one thing. Warm 1 old boot by a sunny window, rub a little wax in, and feel it draw down deep. Just once, so your hands know it. So leave a comment down below. Did your grandparents grease their boots by the fire? Did they have a name for the mix, a ratio I didn't cover, a smell you still remember? The comment with the most heart is the one I build the next video around. And if you want to be standing right here with me when it drops, subscribe now. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to a channel like this one. Keep the old ways.